Hello everyone, my name is Sinead Jones and this is KNKY. This is the live repost of our Instagram feed, which I'm about to start in a few seconds. So if you follow these videos, you know how it works. So give me 2 seconds and we will get started. Hello everyone, my name is Sinead Jones and this is KNKY, which stands for Know the New Kinky You. I am a certified sex coach, certified through Sex Coach University, and we are here to talk about sex. So if there are questions, issues, things that you want to talk about and discover, feel free to send me a direct message and I will be sure to incorporate them into our conversations. So just as a disclaimer, we are recording live on Instagram and I'm also recording this so it can be reposted on YouTube. So forgive the up and down if you see my eyes. Tonight's topic is actually the beginning of what we're going to do as a 4-part series. And the first part of this is really talking about our childhood influences on sex as an adult. So the theme of the series is how we transition through our lives in a sexual nature. So we're going to start with us as, you know, how it is that we developed as children and the messages that we received into adulthood and how they affect us, and then how we had and interacted as sexual beings as single people in dating situations and eventually in long-term relationships and marriage. Those videos will be on YouTube, so if you haven't yet subscribed, please feel free to. I appreciate those of you who have already subscribe, comment, and leave any feedback that you feel would be more conducive to how it is that this information is relayed to you. So let's start. When we're thinking about childhood, I don't think that a lot of us realize how the messages we receive as children impact us as adults. As a sex coach, one of the things that I do when I'm bringing on a new client is to ask them about some of the sexual messages that they may have heard coming up. You know, you have to ask yourself, was your family open about the topics of sex, and did you feel comfortable asking certain questions? Or was your family more reserved, where sex was not a topic to be discussed in public, or perhaps not even at all? Were your family members affectionate with one another? Did they hug and did they kiss and did they say I love you? Or were they distant and affection wasn't something that was prevalent in your family? So, you know, a lot of these things we don't think about, but there is a definite and genuine impact on how it is that we interact socially later on in life. I want you to take the time to think about the messages that you received as you were growing up and try to figure out, you know, is there any correlation that you can find that may perhaps impact you today as a grown person trying to pursue active relationships? When I have this conversation, I often think about a friend of mine who had a very different experience growing up than I did. And so for me and my family, we were affectionate, but sex was just not a topic that we discussed. And, you know, I find it interesting as an adult because I actually come from a fairly big family. So my grandmother had 9 kids. So obviously she had a lot of sex growing up, and I get to, as an adult, tease her about it, you know, but, you know, it just wasn't something we talked about growing up. And it's not like I didn't necessarily feel comfortable asking my mom or my aunts questions. I just preferred to get my information from friends or older cousins or people that I thought that, you know, would be more conducive to answering my questions. And I distinctly remember when I came on my cycle at the age of 11, I never said anything to my mother. And, you know, she actually didn't find out until she had to do the laundry. When she did find out, you know, her response was to give me a book to read, to teach me what it meant to become a woman and have a cycle and what the impacts on my life would be at that particular time. But even after she gave me the book, I still felt that I needed to hide it from her. I needed to read it in the dark under the covers, and I for whatever reason just didn't feel comfortable. It's not like I didn't want to talk to her, I just didn't know how, because it was something that we just never talked about. Now, on the other hand, you have my girlfriend who, again, had a completely different experience with sex growing up. She says that her family was very open talking about sex, and there were no secrets, and she felt very comfortable asking anything, up until the point where she has even taught her children very early about what sex is and the importance of coming to her with questions. Because getting information from other inexperienced people is never good, you want to drive your children especially to you. But the only way that actually works is if you are prepared to have the conversation with them and be that person that is a conduit for a good information. We are only experienced based off of our experiences, and so when we talk to people, it's based on that particular perspective. Now, when we talk to people who, I'm going to try something. I don't know what this is. So there was a request to go live with someone on Instagram, and I just don't know how that works. So we'll see. Now, when you're dealing with somebody and you are young and inexperienced, what you do is relate to them at a level that perhaps isn't what it is that they need in order to be helpful, in order to enhance your development. So what I find, especially back in my day and today, when you ask especially young men how it is that they learn about sex and sexuality, they typically say pornography. And it's because, how common is it that you hear that some young man has found his dad's Playboy collection and has started rummaging through it? You would want to give yourself a position where you're not just learning from external factors. In fact, what happens is when little boys learn sex through pornography, they have an idealized sensation of what sex is supposed to be and what sex is supposed to look like. They believe that little girls grow up to do the things that they see in these videos. And little girls that are exposed to pornography actually believe that this is how they are supposed to behave and this is what they're supposed to do. So I think pornography is great, but I think it's great from a perspective of entertainment and a perspective of trying to perhaps explore yourself and figure out what new things are out there. I don't think that it's a good teaching tool for people who are just learning about sex and sexuality. Even when we are talking about sex education in schools, it's usually abstinence only, but when you do find yourself in a situation where you're talking about comprehensive sex education, it's usually a biology lesson or an anatomy conversation. It's very rarely about the chemistry behind sex. We deal in the laws of attraction, and we have to understand why it is we attract certain people and what it is that we're putting out into the universe based off of who we are, our needs and our wants, to pull in what it is that we need or what it is that we think we need. Because again, those messages, if you're just joining, we started talking about the messages that we receive as young people and how they influence our decisions as growing adults, and that sexuality that we're just learning about ourselves. It greatly impacts our approach and how we manage our future relationships. If you weren't exposed to affection as a young person, how will you really know how to give affection as an adult? If you were taught that sex is a bad thing, or sex is a sin, or that good boys and good girls don't engage in sex. It creates a negative stigma on something that is very natural, but it's not your fault because that's what you were taught. That's how you grew up, and that is the message that was very early implanted in your head. So when you're an adult, it might be that much more difficult to learn how to enjoy sex for the purposes of having sex. But it's not impossible to overcome the messages that may be affecting you in a negative way. The first thing that you need to do is acknowledge it. Acknowledge that you are a person that perhaps isn't enjoying the benefits of sex as your best sexual self. Take a step back, think through your life's journey, and try to associate some of the things that came from your youthful experiences and how they are impacting you today. Trust me, if you just take a deeper dive into what you received as a young person, think about how they may be impacting you today. You know, are you a very shy person and reserved, or are you wildly adventurous? I don't want to give you the impression that sexual messages are just always negative, because they're not. When I say wildly adventurous, it's because I don't want to give you this impression. You can grow up in a house where your family is sex positive. So hopefully my daughter, she does not, have that same restrictive attitude towards sex, because she's going to be able to talk to me about it. We're going to be able to have these discussions about boys, girls, the world around us, and how it's going to impact her, because we've established that very early. These messages will carry over to us as adults. You could be someone like me who is somewhere in the middle, right? I didn't receive negative messages, but I also didn't receive overly affirming messages. So when you are growing up and trying to figure out who you are, you have to understand that it's a process. It's not something that you're going to be able to just do quickly. Hopefully you're in a position where you are open and accepting of the truth for yourself, and that will make the journey a lot easier. I'll give you a little tidbit about me. First of all, let me just say that if you do this discovery and you find that you want to change things that may be limiting you, you need to be comfortable in wanting to make those changes. So for me, growing up, I was never comfortable with even the word masturbation. I never practiced it. It was not something that I did as a young person growing up. There are sexually developmental stages in our lives where we learn about sex. Even babies touch themselves, and it's not necessarily, sexual in nature. What it means is that they found something that feels good. The same reason that they suck their thumbs or like to be hugged and kissed, it feels good. So as you grow up, you have to learn how to develop yourself as a sexual person. And for me, growing up, masturbation was just not something that I did. When you are willing to accept the fact that there are things about you that you are willing to change, because again, as an adult, I had gone through different experiences, especially early, where I had to learn the value of sex. How do the conversations come up? Currently within my household, or when I was a kid? Because as a kid, they just didn't come up. They just didn't. As a young person, I have to well, with my daughter, I have to teach her about her body parts. And I personally am not a fan of nicknames when it comes to genitalia. A penis is a penis, a vagina is a vagina. If somebody touches your child, you want them to know and somebody to understand exactly what has happened. You want them to understand what their body parts are. So that's just me. I'm very open, and if there are questions, I tease my daughter all the time. Do you have a boyfriend? You like to kiss? Who's kissing? So you don't have to always be so serious in your conversation, but you do want to make sure that you're introducing it. So when I met this one young lady who was fairly reserved when it came to sex. When she was married, she had a relationship with her husband. It wasn't something that she was used to, right? She had sex because it was something that she was supposed to do with the men that she dated, or for the men that she dated. It was never really about her as a person. So she never really learned how to appreciate sex and appreciate what it was that she was supposed to feel. Now, sex is definitely something that is a giving scenario. You're supposed to give of yourself to another person, but you're also supposed to have some level of enjoyment for yourself. According to her, she also never masturbated. She rarely liked to talk about sex, but she was willing to work with me, so I appreciate her for that. You know, as we talked about how it was that she wanted to receive pleasure, but she really didn't know what made her happy. You know, she couldn't articulate how to her husband how she could release orgasm in the way that they both wanted. So it was difficult, and so they came to me, and I appreciate them for what it is that they did, but it also took her willingness to acknowledge that things weren't exactly the way that she wanted. And when we talked about her childhood, it was really, she never was taught that sex was supposed to be something that could be fun. It wasn't supposed to be something that could be enjoyable for her. It was just something that happened as part of a relationship. As we transition from children to young adults to very senior adults, we find that our experiences influence us like the messages we receive as children. So we go through these phases of life, and we learn from each phase of life. We take it's the culmination of all of our experiences that make us who we are today, and it will continue to be that way as we grow older and eventually pass away. If we allow ourselves to hold on to negative influences, we will limit our opportunities to be sexually satisfied. Sex is the only thing that brings about life, but it's also meant to bring us pleasure. So, as we go through life, if we don't enjoy it and we don't feel that gratification from the majority of our sexual experiences, I believe, my personal belief, is that it's a tragedy. And what I really think is interesting is that although all of us are different, many of us share a lot of the same experiences that make us more of a community than we realize. And so it's almost like the songs that we hear on the radio about falling in love or breaking up. And depending on where we are in life, you can hear this song and swear somebody wrote it just for you. It's because as different as we all are, we have variations of the same experiences. I'm sure that there are times where we question ourselves and why do we do what we do, or why do we feel what we feel? Perhaps you want to change it and make it better, but you don't know how, and you perhaps are afraid to ask for help. I'm telling you this now because I want you to understand that you are not alone. There are many of us that go through this and we kind of suffer in silence. So, you came in a little late, so apologies for not knowing what's going on. We're talking about the transitions of ourselves as sexual beings and some of the influences of the messages we receive as young people and how they impact us as adults, whether it be negative or positive. It's part of a series that we're going to have on YouTube, which I hope that you subscribe to and watch. So, if you're ever interested, you can always reach out to somebody like me who is a certified sex coach to see how we can work together to make your life the best sexual life it can be. I want you to keep in mind that anything that I say is not going to be 100% applicable to everybody listening. And actually, thank you for everybody that's commented. I'm very curious as to what your experiences are, what messages that you received, and how do you feel that they've impacted you as an adult. And honestly, whether or not you feel that there is room for improvement. So, thank you for those of you who are on the Instagram Live who have commented. If you're going to rewatch this on YouTube, please feel free to comment there. I would love to hear your stories. If you have not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. Everything I do across all social media is at DOYOUKNKY. And again, this is going to be the first part of a 4-part series where we're talking about sex as a single person, sex during dating, and sex in a marriage or a long-term relationship. So I appreciate you who have joined. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next Wednesday. I am Shanae Jones, your resident certified sex coach. See you.